Good morning, I'm Brian Yacono, and this is Political Brew, joined now by Republican analyst Phil Harriman and Democrat Ethan Strimling. A very good morning to both of you. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you. In for Zach Blanchard today. We want to start, of course, with what was a wild week in Augusta, the legislative session going into overtime, well past the original goal of wrapping up on Wednesday. Republicans not happy about it. Senate Minority Leader Trey Stewart held a news conference slamming Democratic leadership, not naming Speaker Rachel Talbot Ross by name, but essentially blaming her for not getting the work done on time. Take a listen to some of what he had to say.
Will be costing taxpayers over $50,000 every day that we have to come back in because of her mismanagement.
Okay, so Phil, we want to start with you. Democrats did not directly respond to the accusations. Is this par for the course, though?
It actually is. It wouldn't matter who the speaker is, what party they're from. This, unfortunately, is how the legislative process works. As the temperatures rise and the tempers rise, most of the bills that are left are really contentious. Expect a few more days, if not a week more, of this.
Yeah, I expect what Republicans are really upset about is the fact that the legislature has actually been accomplishing some very big goals. Paid family medical leave, we got the abortion bill through the House, tribal rights has gotten through, wind power. These are significant achievements that Rachel Talbot Ross can take some credit for. I don't think they like that. They're taking their time to get it right, but as Phil said, the sun's going to come up tomorrow and the legislature is going to extend beyond its deadline. It's how it works.
We can grow to expect that at this point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, the legislature considered a massive list of gun bills, many of which looked to tighten regulations. Talking about background checks, waiting periods, banning bump stocks, all of those have been on the table, of course. So Phil, Maine has a strong hunting tradition. Where is that balance of gun protection and gun regulation?
Sure. I think we also have to pay tribute to Mainers who own firearms. We have one of the lowest percentages of gun violence and one of the highest percentages of gun ownership. And it leads into my response to your question, which is it comes down to responsibility. People who have a firearm legally, many people who have them don't have them legally, but those who do need to assume responsibility for their safety.
Ethan.
I mean, look, just this week, it's remarkable. Our gun laws are so lax in this state that in the past 2 months, we've had 2 mass shootings, right? Just this past week, somebody incredibly troubled was able to get his hands on a gun and murder 2 people in a parking lot. A few months ago, got his hands on 9 handguns and massacred 4 people, tried to kill 3 more on the highway. That's how lax our gun laws. So the balance that you asked about doesn't exist in Maine right now. It is completely on the side of if you want to get a gun, you can get a gun. Hopefully the legislature, the most important bill that they can get passed this session in terms of guns is universal background checks. Nobody should be able to get their hands on a gun without there being a background check to make sure that they can be that responsible gun owner that we want them to be.
Is there a solution that comes, or is this a yearly debate based on what is happening in the news, what's happening in our country? Is this something we'll just always see?
That's a great question, and it is an ongoing discussion. And to me, it comes to the examples you just cited. These are people who arguably should not have had a gun. One of them legally was not allowed to have a firearm. And the people who don't care about our laws are going to find a way to get their hands on a handgun.
Well,
and we need to change the behavior of people rather than assuming that some law is going to change that type of behavior.
Yeah, but you create laws in order to prevent crimes, right? You have a speed limit in order to get people to drive more slowly. If we think that laws have no impact on whether people commit crimes, why do we have any laws? The problem is guns are incredibly accessible here. I can give Phil a gun right now without having any background check on that. And, you don't have to wait 72 hours. There are certain weapons that can only be used for, mass killing. Why would you allow that to be sold? So we don't have a balance right now. Maine does not have, unfortunately, we have the highest in New England, in the Northeast, of gun violence per capita. It's getting worse.
Good example right here of what I imagine is happening on the floor in Augusta. That is the debate.
Right.
Yes. I chaired the Criminal Justice Committee 100 years ago. He was there 150 years ago. This debate's been going on for a long time.
And it will for a while. Okay. Well, one thing that has had significant pushback from the Mills administration this session, tribal rights. Both the House and the Senate approved the bill with enough support Wednesday to overcome a potential veto of that bill. The governor's office has said it is constitutionally vague and could present issues down the road. So Ethan, a big win for the House Speaker right now. by a small margin, though.
Well, on the tribal rights bill, it's actually a pretty good margin. I mean, the tribal rights bill passed substantially in both bodies. I think Governor Mills at this point is the one who's really got to decide what she's going to do here. She's got a real blind spot on this issue. Clearly, the people are behind making sure that the tribes have the rights, the same rights that other tribes have all across the country. That's what this bill will do. It was a top priority of the Speaker. She got it through. You're right. It's tight in terms of whether she has enough to get the override of the veto, but she only needs one more to get there, and I wonder if Governor Mills will finally just say, look, let this become law, and we'll move on.
All right, Phil.
You know, I think this is one of those issues that transcends multiple administrations. Back in my time serving with Governor King, it was one of the topics of conversation, and it's more complicated than it looks on its surface. I think emotionally, by the votes the legislature has delivered, they're emotionally in favor of this, but the governor has a constitutional responsibility, and that's where I think will be more conversations going on behind closed doors in terms of over or sustaining her veto. And remember, this law wasn't a Maine law. This was an act of Congress that passed this law. So there's even complications about whether we can have the authority to do this in the first place. So there's much more. Even if it passes, much more to come.
Another topic we've been tracking, a bill that would require Maine Care to cover gender-affirming care is headed for the governor's desk. The bill bans Maine's version of the Medicaid program from discriminating at reimbursements for medically necessary treatments because someone is transgender. Treatment could include surgery, hormone therapy, and counseling. So, Ethan, in other parts of the country, there have been bans on gender-affirming care and treatment moving forward. Are you surprised at the progress of this in Maine?
I'm really pleased. I mean, as these attacks on trans kids and LGBTQ youth are happening across the country, led unfortunately by sort of the MAGA wing of the GOP, it's been terrifying for kids. And we know that suicide rates among trans kids are the highest among any group. And it's so nice to see our legislature saying, you know what, we are going to stand up for you, and we are going to affirm your right to be who you choose to be. So I'm really, really pleased, and I'm glad that it's through and on the governor's desk.
You know, this is one of those instances, again, where the public policy is probably going to spur more and more debate, but it appears as though it's on its way to passage, which means to me anyway, there's a distinction between transgender children and transgender adults, and that whole process I think is going to end up in the regulatory, and this is what happens. A law gets passed, gets handed over to the bureaucracy, and they write the rules of the game. That's where we got to pay attention to what's in there.
And remember that they wrote the rules, and what this is doing is codifying those rules. So yes, Phil's right, there'll be additional rules, but this is already in the rules for the state of Maine. All this does is codify it.
Okay. With that, we will take a quick break. The Weekend Morning Report is back after this.